Okay. Yes. I'm just waiting for Questpond. Let me know, support if we are live. Uh, if you wish, you can close down your videos. My video can be live out there. You guys can just close down your videos and focus on the training. So I think I'm live. I think I'm live. Yeah, that's what it's doing. Great. So guys, a very, very warm welcome. Good afternoon, good evening, from whichever location you have logged in. Let me know my voice is very clear. Let me know on the chat, my voice is very clear. Uh, so I had asked one question to everyone that how many people have done microservices here? And if you have done microservices, what have you done, right? This I have asked in my internal also on YouTube. This first class is streamed on YouTube as well. So I also asked that, basically how many people have done microservices. Some of the answers I've got, I have implemented RabbitMQ. Some of the answers I've got, many people have said no, almost 90% said no. But one or two people who said yes, they said we implemented RabbitMQ. One of our friends said, we did CI/CD, right, DevOps, and so on. So guys, definitely these are very small components of microservices. And the goal here is, to try to go more in depth, right? So here is the syllabus. I have already flashed the syllabus, right, to everyone that what we are going to take, right? Just to add, this training is happening every Saturday and Sunday, 1 hour on Saturday, 1 hour on Sunday. Complete week you get to practice, you can get the recordings, you get the source code, everything, right? But today's day, the first day, I want to focus on the microservice theory part. This 1 hour, I don't want to get into code. From tomorrow, we'll start getting into code, right? But this 1 hour, I want to really focus on some important vocabularies, without which, that is aggregates, actually, my spell mistake, without which, it is very difficult to understand microservices. So you can see here some of the vocabularies which I'm trying to highlight out here, like domain, subdomain, bounded context, entity, value, aggregate objects, aggregate root, partnership, kernel, right? What are these, right? But before even we go out there, also I'll share my screen here as well. Let me just quickly, too many things, okay, right. So before we go out there, right, guys, first let us try to understand that what is microservice. Now, I know that many people understand this. Microservice is nothing but what we do is that rather than creating one monolith project, so rather than creating one big project, right, what we do is we divide our project into logical sections, right, logical units, right? So what in just, in context, what microservices says is that rather than creating one big monolith application, right? Monolith application means it has this single deployment, single database, right? Definitely, internally, you must have created classes, objects, you have your own way of doing decoupling, right? But it is still one big project, one big deployment by itself, right? So what microservice says, rather than going and making one big project, for example, assume that this is an ERP system. So rather than going and making one big ERP system, what you can do is you can logically decompose it into separate projects, separate deployments with separate database, where you can say, okay, inventory is a separate project with its own database, must be, right? Or must be you have accounting as some of them, or you can have something else out here, right? So rather than going and creating a single project, right, single deployment, right, single database, we try to physically divide our project into multiple units, right? Right. Okay. So that is one part. Okay. The second part, that is a base theme of microservice. Huh? Now, one very important thing, which before even I start, right, I want to talk about that when should we do microservice and when we should not do microservice. So first, just iterating, the overall thought is that you have a big project. So rather than going and having one project and one database, right? I'm not talking about classes now. Those definitely you must have done over a period of time, separate classes, interfaces, decoupling, dependency injection. I do understand that there is a very nice logical decoupling there, right? But when we talk about microservices, there is a physical decoupling, physical different deployment, different database. I mean, in your words, if I say different solution projects, different Visual Studio projects, and so on, right? But the most important part here to understand is that, do we need to do microservices everywhere, right? So here is a small chart I have, that when we should do microservice and when we should not do microservice. Remember, a microservices is not for all projects. If your project is very small, if your project has tight budget, if you have a limited team of 4 or 5 people, right? You don't have too many technical diversity. I mean, like you have, let's say you are just coding in ASP.NET and .NET Core. I'm just saying, and you don't have other team technical diversity, right? You have a simple scaling. You say, okay, I want to support 100 users all across it. There must be 200 users, right? And so on, right? I mean, I don't know what is this tight thing here. This is wrong. But if these are the things, small project, small team, tight budget, you should not be thinking about microservices, period, right? And specifically, guys, I've seen, even if there is no budget, people start putting microservices. You're calling for trouble. You're calling for trouble, right? So this is the most important thing which you should have in your head, that it should be a considerably large project. Now we'll say, so large project means what, like 10 people team, 20 people team. It is very difficult to put a number out there, but a large project means it should have 5 or 6 subdomains. We'll come to what is a subdomain, or 5 or 6 different logical units, like inventory, payroll, accounting, at least 5 or 6 large domains it should have in that big domain, right? You are also looking, so first is a large project. I would take this as first, good budget. I mean, like if you have if management is just doing hawabaji and saying like, let us do microservices, and is giving it 2 people and 1 person and do some R&D, it's not going to be successful, right? First is good budget. Second one, it should be a very considerably large project. I mean, both of them are inclusive of each other. If it's a big project, the budget is also good, right? You are looking for team autonomous. Means what? You say, okay, one team is going to work on inventory. He's going to focus on that domain. Another team is going to go and focus on accounting. They understand debit and credit and all that, right? Both team will not sit in each other's meeting. You'll say, okay, accounting team will not sit in inventory meeting trying to understand inventory domain. So both of them are working separately. Both of them are parallel. Both of them don't sit in each other's meeting. Definitely there will be a communication which will happen for exchanging data, but as such 80-90% time they won't sit on each. So autonomous team also you're looking at. You're looking at parallel deployment, parallel development. You're saying this team will develop parallelly. I will sell it also parallelly. My sales team will say, I will sell inventory separately. I want to sell accounting separately, right? See, the management driven, right? Technical diversity. Something is coded in Java, other thing is coded in .NET, and then must be, yes, you want to go and integrate them. Technical diversity, right? Individual scalability. This is also important. Let us say you have a healthcare domain. Okay. Now you say that, okay, you have accounting, you have inventory, you have payroll, and you have patient management system. Now patient management system is heavily loaded. So when patient comes and stands in the line, you have to go and enter a lot of data out there. But accounting and inventory, they are not loaded something. They are not loaded so much, right? Only 2 accountant sets, or must be in inventory, 3 inventory people are sitting, right? So you want to say individual scalability. So you want now that the patient management system should scale to 1,000 users must be, and the accounting system, and this can go into lower end, right? So are you also looking for individual scalability? Are you looking for failure isolation? That if the inventory fails, the patient management system continues. If the patient management system fails, the accounting person is still able to close his accounts must be, right? So I think the most important part before even starting microservices, everything cannot be microservices, right? And as I said, first is the budget, right? First is the budget. And most important for microservices is it should be driven by business. Means your management should have the gist and the will. It should have that sankalp, I don't know how to say that, saying that, yes, microservices is for us. We are going to dedicate budget. We are going to make sure that we have that big project, we have that big thing, right? Or else, you as a technical person standing with a single sword out there and saying, I will do microservices will not be successful. So this is the path, this is my thought process path I've done when to use microservice and when not to use microservice, right? This is the first thing, the first part of this lecture. So now you'll say, okay, sir, very nice. So you said we have to go and divide our system into different small sections. I can see a lot of questions out there. Guys, if you have any questions, you please put down on the chat. I will surely come out there, right? So I will surely answer them. So first is, we said, why microservices? What is microservice, right? Microservices means trying to create separate projects, separate databases. Second, we talked about that what cannot be microservice. What are the means every project cannot be microservice. A small project cannot be microservice, right? And what kind of project can be microservice, right? Now, the next thing which is important out here is, so you say, okay, sir, as you have said, that microservice means that you are saying that divide your project into small units. But how should this division be? I mean, like, for example, if I give to any developer out there who has not done microservice, he will say data access layer is one microservice for him, must be, right? Or he will say, oh, like, looks to me, my user interface is one separate microservice, right? Now, in order to give you a right path of implementing microservice, the right way to implement microservice, that path is shown by using this thing called as domain-driven development. See, microservice, it is an architectural style. Please understand, architectural style means, I mean, like, there is design pattern, just to add, there is architecture pattern, and there is architecture style, So design pattern means like factory pattern, your singleton pattern, the source code. You say, okay, singleton pattern means class is static and something constructor private, right? Factory pattern means you try to centralize the object creation. Iterator pattern means, so here the source code. Architecture pattern means you just know the block diagrams, controller, view, and model. Architectural style means that, like, REST is an architectural style. SOA is an architectural style. Microservice is an architectural style where we say that divide the project into smaller pieces. In architectural style, we just have one or two lines. It is more like a concept. It does not have diagrams. It does not have source code, right? So microservice, it is an architectural style, where we think about dividing the project into small units, right? While it is domain-driven development, which shows the right path to implement microservice, it is nothing but it is a way where you think in terms of domains, where you think in terms of your business. If your business says we have to, we have one customer and multiple address, you write exactly code as per your business. If your business says we have inventory domain and we have accounting, then you divide your project as per your business, right? So the right way to implement microservice is to follow domain-driven development. There is no compulsion. If you think that you are smart enough, which, that you can go and implement microservices in your own way, you can do it. But domain-driven development gives you the right approach to do it, right? So now what happens in domain-driven development? In domain-driven development, the first thing what you do is, remember guys, today's thing is all about theory. I would like to just make sure that all the vocabularies are at place, and tomorrow we'll start with coding, right? So must be today, if I get a chance, I will start with coding as well, but I can look at the time. It's difficult. Let us see. So in domain-driven development, first what they say, okay, you have a business and you want to go and break down your project into small physical projects, physical databases, and physical units, right? Logical units, whatever it is, right? So he says that the first thing is identify your core domain, identify your subdomain, and identify your generic domain, right? What do you mean by core domain, right? Core domain means the domain by which you get your bread and butter. For example, if let us say somebody is creating a hospital management system, or let's say he's working in healthcare. So the core thing out there is patients. How do you add a patient? How do you give medication to the patient, right? What is that competitive edge by which you will be distinguished in the market? For example, when you go to a competitor out there and the competitor says, like, if let's say 2 hospital management systems are shown before you, what is that cutting edge between them? Like, for example, if a management sees accounting here, he will say, "Arey, accounting to isme bhi chahiye, usme kaun sa bada baat hai," right? Inventory here also you want, right? So those are like inventory in context of hospital management system, inventory, payroll, all this, must be, they become subdomains. But what is your core domain means? Your domain from which you get your money, the domain from which you get that cutting edge, the domain by which you become competitive in the market, right? First is you need to identify this. Now, don't say that all is core domain, right? That would be wrong. You should ask the management then, what is the core domain of yours, right? This is the first part. And the other ones, like example, in case of hospital management system, must be the patient management is the biggest thing out here, which I should be doing. But subdomain, for example, in hospital, we have to do accounting, right? Isn't it? We have to do inventory. Why not? We have to have some payroll system. Why not? We can have ambulance. We have pharmacy. These subdomains help the core domain. But like in a hospital system, if you have accounting, that is not something great. Like they say, it is by default. Inventory by default, right? Then you have generic domain. These generic domains are domains which are across industry. For example, user management system, user roles, or must be logging, you want to log some errors and so on, or must be authentication, these kind of domains, they span just not into healthcare, they can span into travel and so on. So the first part in domain-driven development is identify your core domain, identify your subdomain, and identify your generic domain. Step one in microservice, right? Identifying the domain. Okay. So, sorry guys, today I have to do a lot of speaking and theory out here, but believe me that these things will help you, right? So we said, okay, there is microservice. So how do we go and divide our projects into pieces? We said domain-driven development. What does the domain-driven development first says? Go and divide your domain into core, go and divide your domain into subdomains, and divide your domain into generic domain. Good. Okay. After this, you say, okay, now I identified my domains. Let us go and start. Assume that all the documentation is at place, the use cases are at place, right? You say, okay, my core domain, for example, let us say patient management system. I will say, I want to do patient management, right? This can involve giving medications to the patient. This can involve giving appointments also to the patient. Let's assume that giving appointments is also one of the core part of patient management system, right? So all this is out here. Now you say, okay, let me go and first from here, let us say you create a class. Now a little bit of code I'm writing here, right? You say, okay, I want to create here class patient. This class patient has a name, it has an age, it has an appointment. Then this same patient, when he goes to the doctor, you will say, okay, so he goes to the doctor and there he gets medications. Okay, he gets medications, gets tablets, right? And so on, right? So again, now what you do is that you say, okay, there is an appointment system which is for patients. Think about it. And then you, again, in this, you try to bifurcate more. You say, there is a clinical part to this patient. Clinical means the same class patient must be, the same patient class is out here also, but here we take his height, his weight, what medications he will take. Here, when we talk about this patient class, we say, okay, we just want to know which doctor you want to meet. Are you paying the money, right? Whatever the fees is there, what time you want the appointment. So here, the context, this context and this context are quite different. They are same patient class, but the contexts are different out here. One more word which I want to introduce out here, which is in domain-driven development, which is termed as bounded context. Bounded context means once you know your core domain, further you can segregate and say, okay, this is an appointment system and this is, clinical system, which is used by doctors and nurse. So in the appointment system, when the patient comes, he comes to take appointment. He's not a patient still. He's just taking an appointment out there. But the same patient, when he's in the clinical, the doctor sees him as a patient. He will give him medications and so on. Here, the girl who is sitting on the counter will say, what time you have come. There is a different context to this, right? This is termed as bounded context. So when you create your classes in DDD, it can be, we'll talk about different types of classes, entity classes, value classes, and so on. You have to make sure that you know which bounded context you are talking about. For example, let us say in a subdomain. In a subdomain, you have pharmacy. Inside the hospital, you have pharmacy. Remember, guys, like just quickly here, healthcare is my favorite domain. It's one of the domains where I'm not only invested technically as well as financially. And, I will give you my GitHub link of my hospital management system, which is made in Angular, MVC core. It's a monolith application. So that's why I've taken this example. I can connect well with this example, right? So pharmacy. Now in pharmacy, again, there is a patient. Please understand, all of this will have their own database, different solutions, right? Now here in pharmacy, he's going to go and buy some medicine, different bounded context, right? And whenever as a developer, you are talking with your end user, right? When you're talking with your end user, this should be very clear. What is the vocabulary he is talking? He's saying that here he's talking about a patient which is related to appointments, and here he's talking about a patient which is related to medications. Here he's talking about a patient who is going and going to the pharmacy and buying some. Must be he's not a patient also. Must be his relatives are going and buying. Things are very different out here. The contexts are very different. So for that, the another thing which domain-driven development says is that follow ubiquitous language. I'm sorry, my English is my second language. Ubiquitous language, right? Ubiquitous language. These names are just big, guys. Nothing else. Ubiquitous language means that when the user is saying patient in context of medication, and when you are thinking the patient in context of medication, you both are on the same page, right? When the user is saying patient in terms of billing or must be in terms of appointment, what you are thinking and what he is thinking are same. It is not like patient everywhere, right? So ubiquitous language, right? So very quickly, just redrawing it so that you understand this flow. And once you understand this flow, things will be very clear, right? We said, yes, microservice. What is the fundamental by which we implement microservice? Domain-driven development. Identify your core domain, your subdomain, your generic domain. After that, you say, for every of the domain, you can have different bounded context, right? Okay. And between these bounded contexts, whatever classes you have or entities you have, right? They should follow a common ubiquitous language. Okay. So some vocabulary now. So henceforth, whenever I say bounded context, you have to understand. Now, some questions which can come into your mind is that, so can we have one domain, multiple bounded contexts? Yes. Can we have one domain with one bounded context? Yes. Right. So there is no hard and fast rule saying that one bounded context per one domain. It can be like, for example, you just saw my patient management system. I had bifurcated into two bounded contexts, right? Possible. Okay. Okay, good. So this is all good now. The second thing I think which you should now keep into your mind is, and this is again one more word which is coming from domain-driven development, is context map. Context map, right? Remember, we'll zoom into bounded context. We'll talk about entities, we'll talk about value objects and all that, but I want to first talk about the overall thought process, right? Context map. Context map says that, okay, how does this data or this class here, or now remember, I don't want to use that word classes and data, but how does this entity map to this entity? Means, for example, when you say a patient who is actually taking an appointment, what do you have with him? You have name, you have the time of the appointment when he's going to come, and only the doctor. That's, doctor whom he wants to attend. Now, when he goes to this is the appointment thing, right? When he goes now to the doctor, a lot of things come into picture, right? You will say, okay, now we need name, definitely, but we don't need the time of appointment. Doctor is not interested in that, right? He just needs the name. Must be he needs some past history and all that, but right. And then he will say, okay, I'll tell him how many pills to take, right? Let's say here also he's paying the money. Assume he's taking an appointment and he has paid some service charge, or I'll say some appointment charges. Again, doctor is interested in money, but I'm just saying, let us assume that when he's seeing on his screen, he's not interested in how much money he has paid, right? All doctors are interested in money as such, right? But name, the pills or like medications, what he wants to take and so on, right? So here you need to give a little bit thought on that, okay, how this, between this bounded context, how this mapping will take place. So from that perspective, microservices also talks about two ways of looking at things, right? One is they term it as, how do you say, so remember all the syllabus I'm trying to follow from here only. This is the first thing what we are going to take today, right? So one is, he talks about tactical design. Tactical design. And another one he says strategical design. Guys, today, first day, please excuse me. You have to know these vocabularies, or else what happens when I later say, when I'm writing this CQRS and say this is a service, you don't understand it. If I'm saying now this is a bounded context, I'm passing data, you will not understand it, right? So strategy design means what? The design which focuses on how the bounded context will talk with each other. Strategic design. Tactical design talks about inside the bounded context, what is your approach? I repeat this. Whenever you're reading any microservice document out there, right, or DDD, you will come across these two words that, okay, contextually, what is your thought process of mapping the, the way it will work, right? And that is called as strategical design, right? Strategical design. And the inside the bounded context, you will create class, you will create service classes, you will create value objects, you will create repository pattern, you will use CQRS, you will use mediator pattern, you will use, I don't know, aggregate route, right? Now, that is all part of tactical design we are talking about, right? So strategy mostly talk about this, right? Now, in strategy pattern, strategy approach, right? There are 2 or 3 things we should know, right? I will come to questions. Let me complete all of this. Put all the questions down there. Last 15 minutes, 20 minutes. Also, I will extend the class for more 10 minutes. But let me complete this all thing, so that tomorrow we are in a good shape, right? Now, let's talk about strategy first, right? Because tactical design, we can talk tomorrow. Because tactical design more is, when I start writing the classes, when I start writing the services, when I start writing the value objects, all will come into picture, right? So strategy design, first thing, I can see one question here. I will answer this. Question is coming right before my eyes. Why are you identifying core domain and subdomain? Why don't you just identify domains? A question here. See, if I know my core domain, I will put my resources maximum over there. My management will be focused on that. If you say all domains are equal, then what is your cutting edge? It is very important to identify where your resources, where your main developers will sit, what is your focus, where your maximum budget will be allocated. So that's why identification of the domain is very important. Very, very important, guys, right? So I can understand your concern. And all domains cannot be core domain. Close your eyes and think. I know that previously when I started learning microservices, I thought that all domains, a compulsory domain, if you have a compulsory domain, that does not mean it's a core domain. Please understand, like accounting is necessary in hospital systems. Inventory is necessary, but the core domain is patient management system, because patients and doctors helps us to earn money in hospital. That is the main part. So that you need to clearly identify. There cannot be multiple core domains. If there can be, but then that is exceptional. You as a team and management have to agree on that. Okay. Okay. Coming to strategy. So now you have a bounded context. Don't think about objects and classes now. And this is another bounded context. Assume. There are 2 vocabularies again, which are very much used before I talk about different ways of context mapping. One is they term it as upstream and one is they term it as downstream. Please understand, guys, when I start writing my APIs, I'll be using these words. So upstream means, this bounded context will supply data to the downstream. So for example, let us say pharmacy. Now, when the patient goes to the pharmacy, he needs to probably get the data from the billing or from the doctor saying that the doctor has referred him to the pharmacy. So the doctor becomes here the upstream, the doctor module, or I'll say the clinical module, right? Or the nursing module, whatever it is, where you enter the patient data. He becomes supplier of the data, and this guy becomes the customer of the data, right? Assume 2 bounded contexts is there. So upstream means who supplies the data, and the downstream. And I'm saying, let's not talk data, but I'm saying that he supplies things. It can be logic also. It can be not only just data. Okay. You can keep, for simplification, you can think data, but the point is that the upstream supplies all the necessary things so that the downstream can function, right? So upstream and downstream. These are 2 things here. Okay. Now, there are various ways of context mapping. Strategic design. I'm sorry, strategy design means from the top, think about how bound. So first one, now here are something you can see: partnership, shared kernel, customer supplier, conformist, anti-corruption, open host, right? Let me talk little on this, right? Partnership, right? In case of a partnership, right? Again, guys, at this moment, don't think about classes and objects. I will talk about tomorrow, right? Let's talk about partnership. In case of partnership type of collaboration, what happens is, so you have a bounded context, let us say patient management system. 4 or 5 developers are working on it. Another one you have, let us say your inventory management or pharmacy management system, pharmacy, right? 2 developers are sitting on it, right? So partnership means both of them will sit together. They will work together. Means all the 5 developers will sit together and say, okay, like we agree that these are the common properties which we should have with each other. We agree that these are the common fields we should have with each other. So in case of partnership, it is more of a collaboration where the team meets, where the team discusses, they define, what are the common data between them, and they start working, right? They definitely work parallelly, but they confirm that, yes, these are the common data types. These are the common data structure we have to follow, right? So that is partnership. Okay. Second kind of thought process here, which goes is shared kernel, right? My handwriting is horrible. Shared kernel means you say, okay, this is the common patient class we both will share. Now that patient class will have all of the data. This is the common user, what you call your common DLLs, common components, common code. So this is a shared kernel. Now, please note, you will say, sir, partnership also looks the same. See, partnership is more about collaboration, that 2 teams will have to talk together. They have to communicate, right? It is possible that the partnership can create a shared kernel. It is possible, right? So first is partnership. Second is shared kernel, right? Okay. The third one, we are talking about customer supplier, right? Customer supplier. Okay. Customer supplier means if you have 2 bounded contexts who wants to communicate to each other, you will say one bounded context is the supplier, the upstream. Remember, I talked about upstream. You will say that, for example, you will say, okay, inventory will supply all the data to accounting, and accounting is just a customer. So in case if accounting team says, I want to get something from you, the supplier bounded context has to change. Very important. When you say I'm following customer supplier, it puts a load on that team members to supply the data to work out the logic. So if you say, okay, inventory team, now you have to supply data, so accounting team aram se baithega. So, and that is possible that sometimes because the accounting does not have the data, whatever, right? This is again one way of working, saying this bounded context will work hard. He will supply all the data to you. You have to go ahead and consume the data and use it, right? Customer supplier. So here there is no shared kernel, but must be there is a web API which is exposed and he gives out data. Must be through the queues you are passing some data and so on, right? The fourth approach out here is conformist, right? Remember, guys, I know this is all theory, but please bear with me. Conformist means one of the other bounded context team members are ready to change. They will say, okay, so I need to add one more property here. I'm ready to do that. You don't have to change. In case of conformist, it is one of the parties out there will conform with the design of the other party. For example, I was working in healthcare. In healthcare, the HIPAA compliance says you need to have audit trail. Now, if you need to have audit trail, then either it's a patient bounded context or it is a accounting bounded context. They all have to follow it. So now here for the HIPAA thing, to maintain that HIPAA, all the team members with the things will change out here, right? Conformist, right? So if you say no, like one team is ready to change, the impact is not huge, right? The other bounded context cannot change. You can follow conformist also. It is very important to define the strategy right when you start, because if you don't define the strategy, then what will happen is one team member will complain that the other team member is not giving data. It can become chaos out there, right? So conformist. And you can see by this, you can also analyze that if you don't define your core domain and subdomain, you don't know that who are the main, which is the main project and which is the sub project, right? Conformist. Okay. Anti-corruption layer. Good names out there. They are given very nice names, right? Anti-corruption layer. In case of an anti-corruption layer, what happens is in between there is a middle layer or there is a middle component who translates object or data from one component to another, one bounded context to another bounded context, right? Means what? Let us say you have here inventory. And you want to say, oh, like when I send the data to accounting, you have to make a debit and a credit. Okay. So this anti-corruption layer, what it will do is it will read the inventory data and it will say, okay, for this is the debit and this is the credit. He will make an entry. He will give the accounting data in such a way to the accounting subsystem or to the accounting bounded context that the accounting bounded context does not have to do anything, right? Again, this is one more way of working out, right? Anti-corruption layer. Let me give you host service and publish language as homework. I'm not taking in the class host service and published language because I don't want to make it just a a theory class out there, right? So you can see now these are the various ways you can define the way two bounded contexts can map together, context map. And remember, do not shy away from taking multiple of them. You will say, okay, we will follow conformist also in some places, we will follow partnership also, but don't try to do all of them. So one or two is okay. Like for example, you will say, okay, partnership and shared kernel, they go together. But then you will say, no, like I will take shared kernel also, and let us also have an anti-corruption layer also. So try to see that, majority of the time you follow one of the ways, one of the strategies of context mapping, not all of them, right? But nothing stops you to use all of them. What will happen is then there is no, see, there is a core team, right? The core team will supply data and the other team will use the data. One bounded context has to be core out there, right? Isn't it? So if you start mixing up all of them, then it can become problematic. So just try to see that which one of them is good, right? Good. So just redrawing that, what I'm thinking out there. I'll come to now the questions. It is almost 30 minutes. We'll go through each of the questions, at least the theory part. I'll just put a final diagram out there. So microservice, to break down into smaller pieces, we say core domain, we say subdomain, we say generic domain, right? After that, everybody is in a different bounded context, right? Remember, you can have, this is one diagram I've drawn out here, right? Bounded context. I can also draw another diagram like this, like in subdomain, another bounded context, right? And then you have a common language between them, ubiquitous language. And definitely the most important is the context map. Inside this, I'll come to that. When you say that inside the bounded context, inside this bounded context, when you define, you will have entity, we have value object, you will have repository, you will have CQRS, you will have their own databases, you will have tenant design. This is all. So this one is the tactical design. And this one, this context map from the top is the strategy design. So in this, we discussed about customer supplier, we discussed about conformist, we discussed about anti-corruption layer, we discussed about shared kernel, we discussed about partnership. And so this is the overall 30,000 feet level. I've still not gone internal here, guys. I need to go internal also into bounded context. This is where our main coding is, right? But this is the overall vocabulary of microservice, right? Okay, now I'll come to questions. It is almost 40 minutes. And I think at least 10, 15 minutes, I will start taking some questions out there. Okay. Right. Okay. I'll too many questions out there. Okay. Let me start from the top. Oh my God. Like too many things out there. Okay. Let me start from internally first. Voice is breaking. Okay. Okay. I have shared my screen out here also. Everything is, guys, like we have the, first thing I would like to thank everyone out here. We have this maximum Zoom, which is full, and then Teams, which is full, and YouTube is full. This is all your love, right? I'm not that big technical person, and still you guys are, I'm so thankful for all this attendance of this lecture. I never expected so much lecture. So, okay. Okay, now let us go back. Okay, let me go back to questions. Okay. Okay, voice is breaking. Okay. Okay, is it possible? Okay. Okay, I'll cover. So also we're going to cover API gateway. Yes, API gateway I will cover. Definitely without API gateway nowadays, we'll use one of the open source of API gateway as well, right? Right. API gateway is there. Right? Okay. Who identify which domain? Okay. Chalo, let's start from here. Guys, today's day, guys, just keep for yourself for theory part. कल से coding करेंगे. Don't worry about it. Don't worry too much about the code, right? If your choice of choosing microservices goes wrong, everything will go wrong, right? Who identifies which domain? Architect or business domain? I think business people. See, the generic domain can be identified by technical people, user management and security, and all that. But the subdomain and the core domain have to be identified by management. We can definitely facilitate them. We can sit in their meeting, right? But definitely that has to be identified by the management. I feel so. Management or the salesperson who thinks that this is how it looks like, right? Does the same entity can be referred differently in bounded context? Okay, so let me try to get this. You're saying that can the same class be referred differently in the? See, first thing, I don't know this line what it means out here. If you create a class patient, you should have a separate class patient into the other bounded context. Don't try to inherit. Don't try to do that. In microservices or in bounded context, you can have a shared kernel and all that. I understand it. But if you look at the way microservices is there, they believe in duplicating code. Duplicating means they believe that if the contexts are different, just keep them different. Don't try to mix them. Or else what will happen? Then you will have one class, one huge bulky class doing all of them, right? So I think create a different class patient for appointment system and create a different class patient for doctors. You will be happy. Okay. If bounded context in one line. Okay. Question from here. See, bounded context in one line means that if you are having an entity inside a domain, for example, as I give an example, let us say customer. In the sales domain, a customer means who is going to go and pay money. But must be in the accounting domain, that customer means just a debit and a credit entry, right? So a context is very important for all the entities. And remember why this is important, because if you have a different context, you just create a different class. It drives the technical design in that way. Again, over here, this small principle which comes into picture in my mind, solid principle. In that we have that L Lisco. It looks like a, what is it? It looks like a duck. It quacks like a duck, but it has batteries. Solid principle. Means that patient looks like that patient of the doctor, but he only pays money out there. He does not take treatment. And in that another room, when he goes to the doctor, he's not going to talk about money. He's going to talk about treatment. So they both are patients, but they have a very different context, right? So a bounded context in one line mean that entities which are lying in both of the contexts, they're identified differently. And remember, ubiquitous language. When two people in your team are speaking with each other, they understand which patient they are talking about. Okay. Context mapping. So as I've said, so repeat context mapping. See, context mapping means if you have two bounded contexts, and if there are entities which look very similar, how are you going to map the logic and the data of one bounded context with another bounded context, right? I'm not talking about queues here. I can see that questions are, no, not queues. I'm saying that, will you create a separate layer in between? As I've said, will you have a common DLL? Don't think about queues now. बाद में आएंगे यार. अभी jump कर रहे हो. Rabbit MQ. मालूम है मुझे Rabbit MQ करना है last को, right? I know that. I'm thinking from the top, start thinking about that. Who will actually provide data and so on, right? So context mapping means mapping, a class. If you want to really go to the entity level, mapping a class data from one bounded context to another bounded context. When I start writing code, this will be, sir, please suggest a book. Somehow difficult to revise, and somehow I agree, man. All things are so difficult, right? So guys, the book I will suggest, buy the book of Eric Evans, I would suggest, right? So first thing, Eric Evans is the person who created DDD. You can go and buy the book of it. If not, now guys, there is one free book in case if, don't be so much miser, that you can always spend some money for books, right? If not, this is also one good document I found online. I think it is freely available on the website as well. So here I did like, if you look at this book, first thing, go and buy this book, guys. I have this hard copy with me. So here is this small diagram which they have put out there. Like you can see services, entities, repository. They're not giving the bigger picture out here, but they are talking a lot of things. So they're given a diagram out there, and they have talked about all this theoretically. They have not talked about with a code. With the code, I'll talk in terms of C#, but they have talked about ubiquitous language. What exactly is that? Entities, what is it that, right? Bounded context, what is it? Context mapping, what is it? So I'm like, if you go and see, okay, bounded context, so what is it? Page number. Remember, it's like a storybook. You have to read it 2-3 times. Don't think about source code out here. So if I go to 69 line number, okay, so there is this bounded context, iska upar niche ho gaya sab page numbers, I don't know. Oh God, okay. Somewhere it went at the top. Okay. So first thing, if you look at this book, right? I'm sorry, I was going to bounded context. The page number went somewhere else. I'll just show if some wrong page numbers they have put out there. Oh, come on, refactoring this. I don't know, the page numbers have gone somewhere down and up below. But if you look at this book right out here, it does not have that index. I can circulate this book. This book is freely available from InfoQ. I downloaded from there. It is not written by Eric. Please understand. Eric's book is much detailed over here. But two trainers like me who can make complex systems simplified, Abel and Floyd, they wrote this book, and it is pretty good, for people to understand. But remember that this book does not have any source code. So, for example, if you read at ubiquitous language, right? Example, you will just find theory and theory like this. You have to read, you have to think. So if you go and see this, like you have to read. It's like, okay, domain, read, no code out here, right? But that's what will make your mind think like domain-driven development. Okay, so must be this book. You can download it or send us a mail. Support team will give that, right? Okay. Why can't we use repository? Why should we follow CQRS? So Shravanti, please wait for this question's answer tomorrow, right? Is customer supplier same as consumer publisher? Must be. So so Gajanan, we can change this vocabulary out here, and that's the right way of looking at it. And I don't know why why didn't they say, but it cannot be publisher subscriber, frankly. Yeah, but one is a consumer and another one is a supplier. Yes, so one is a customer and supplier. Must be one is a publisher and another one is a subscriber, right? Since we do a study, but we minimize Microservice budget, client wants elephant in the budget bowl. Yeah, so that's right, Mohit. I think very good question. See, I think this I've made it very clear. If you don't have money, then you just get a hut in that. And if you have the money, then you get a bungalow, right? So if the project budget is tight deadline, the management does not understand it, there is no team, there are 2 people, right? Then you are calling for trouble. Absolutely. Charani ki murgi, barane ka masala, right? And remember, microservices brings a lot of complexity into 100. You have to deal with queues, you have to deal with Docker, you have to deal with all that. So first is yes and no for microservice is very important. And I think that diagram which I've showed previously, I hope that in that diagram I had clearly talked about what cannot be a microservice, right? And when not to use. I think you should learn when not to use first, right? Okay. Can there be multiple bounded contexts in a core domain? Yes, absolutely. The mapping between it is not one-to-one. Mostly it is one-to-one, one domain with one bounded context mostly, right? But not necessary. You can have multiple bounded contexts also, right? How communication will happen between 2 microservices, right? Okay. Now we'll talk about this, Shravanti. I know that you are getting into the code. 4th or 5th class, don't worry, all this thing will come, right? Until we don't do value objects, until we don't do repository pattern, until we don't do CQRS, I'm not talking. But yeah, if to answer your question, you can use queues, you can use API, you can use a lot of ways, right, to do that. We'll talk about that. Who is to care to divide? I mean, product owner, manager, or like, again, this question. See, like this answer has to come from business, the person who owns the business or the team who owns the business. They know what they will sell. They know what is cutting edge, which will bring the next business to the company. They have to identify the core domain. As I've said, generic domains, as a technical person, we can identify. Other ones, they have to identify, right? What is mostly used? Okay, time tested. Okay, good question again. There is no one answer for that. I know that it would be very bad to say it depends, right, and all, but it is mostly a cocktail, like partnership, shared kernel. See, somewhere it can be conformist because the other team does not want to change the design. They are into production. They say we can't change now. So the other person, the other bounded context, when I say other person, other team bounded context has no option, but he becomes a conformist. So there is no one rule, but I'm saying that if you understand these strategies, you know what you are coding. That's what the point is, right? Okay. Netflix and Prime Video work on this and this. On same, one is a matured micro, while other from why is that? Must be Netflix has a budget, so that's why they have a microservice. See, like I think a project like Netflix and Prime Video should be microservice. I feel so. At least I feel so, because it is very important, because the budget will be high or the team size is high, right? So if someone is developing a monolith application out here, he won't be in the race too far. So there I can understand, that they have to have microservice. So why the other is a monolith, I don't have any idea. I didn't talk with these two companies, but the point is, for things like Netflix and Facebook, and I believe microservices does fit very well. Okay. Can you explain, guys, I'm taking up now questions only, because let me not take new topics, right? Can you please explain the difference between partnership and shared kernel? See, think about that. Partnership is, probably just human collaboration, human interaction. You talk with them, he talks with you, the two teams sits together and talks, right? And comes on a common way of working. Now that common way of working can be shared kernel, can be common vocabulary, published language, can be something, So the partnership, if you look at the definition out here, if I just go and if you try to Google up the definition of partnership, I can just, this document, guys, is again will be uploaded. Control F. If you look at the definition of partnership, right, out here, cooperate with each other, right, and work jointly and so on, right? But in case of shared kernel, we said you need to have a common code base. You need to have a common code base. So here we are, shared kernel is more, and I think shared kernel cannot be achieved without partnership. That is another thinking. But shared kernel is very clear that you need to have a common DLL. I'm sorry to use that word directly, common DLL, but common code base you need to have. Okay. Right. Guys, too many questions out there. Let me, where is my Zoom? Okay. Okay. Yeah, conformist will come when legacy system is there. Very good thing. If you look at conformist, sometimes, what can you do, right? The other system is not ready to change. Also, conformist comes in times, where the other bounded context team is very strong. वो बोलता है, भाई मैं change नहीं करूँगा. You are a small single API project, change it, right? So I've seen conformist coming when the other team can change and it does not have a huge impact, right? But that is a good example, legacy systems, conformist, right? Okay. Okay, very good. Okay, so Mohit has come out with guys, I'm sorry if I'm missing some questions out there. I don't want to miss it. But think about, I have like 100 questions, more than 100 questions. So I can miss. Correspond support, can you take all the questions? Must be, I can just answer them in a separate video. So if two domains have the same name, like patient, but both of them have different contexts, but use different names. That is not the problem. The problem is not different name, but what different name you will use. For example, you will say patient doctor, or let us say you will say patient, and here you will say customer, then that can become more complex also, isn't it? For example, you will say that when the patient is actually paying the money to me, he's a customer. When he goes to the doctor, he is a patient. So now this ubiquitous language, you both have to follow. In case you want to keep different names, it's not about the names. It's about when we are sitting in the meeting room with the end user, when he says patient and I say patient, are we in the same context of doctor or billing or inventory or payroll. Getting it? For example, a doctor can be a user in a system, and a doctor can be a doctor to a patient. Now, what is the context we are talking? So the names can be different, but the context is important out here. And for that, ubiquitous language is there. It is not about the naming convention. Please understand. Yeah, naming conventions you can keep. Okay. What email ID should I get? Questpond@questpond.com. Just send it. I started from down now. Huh? Some questions have started from down, so sorry, right? Okay. And remember, guys, all the answers are not with me. I'm not a guru in microservice. Huh? The answer of microservices, inner details of microservices lies with you, your team members, your management, your business team. You have to discuss and come out, right? So there is no like, there are rules and regulations given. There are things given by microservice, but the final answer lies with your team and the way you communicate, right? So I can see some questions out there. I will follow only anti-corruption. No, that is not. Which factor results to cost more? Example, is it technology, number of team members? See, like microservice will become costly, right? Now you have different databases. You need to sync with them. You need to implement something like queues. You need to create different multiple classes, like you are using CQRS. CQRS is not a compulsion, but you will end up with now same class patient here, same class patient there, right? You will start using Docker to deploy them separately. You will think about resiliency. You will say one goes down. If it goes down, right, then I should again try to reconnect. So definitely, like, one project has now split up into multiple projects. The complexity has just multiplied, isn't it? And let me tell you guys, I know that we are doing microservice lecture. It is very hot in the market. But whatever microservices project I'm seeing out there, many of them, not all of them, but many of them, at least some part of them are not doing very well. Let me tell the reality, the harsh truth. On the contrary, the monolith applications are doing very well. So you have to be very careful when you are choosing microservice, right? Okay. Share the book author name. Book author name is Eric Evans. If you want to get that book, that is from InfoQ. What is the core benefit of microservice? And what is the core benefit of microservice? See, I think the core benefit of microservice must be, so core benefit of microservice. I think, guys, so very quickly, the core benefit of microservice lies in that diagram. I don't know, where is the diagram? So this one. I mean, when to use is the core benefit, right? First thing, okay, I'll put down here. This is one small benefit only, isolated deployment. Like if the first benefit, let me tell you, first benefit, the team members are not sitting in each other's meeting. Let us talk about people first. Forget about technology. For example, I remember that I was working in an accounting project and I was working with travel domain with one of my friend. I was still sitting in his ticketing meeting, unnecessary meeting, 4 hours ka meeting chal raha hai. Nothing to do with accounting, debit, credit, but I'm sitting. Why? It's a monolith application. If I change my table, he is going to change. So the first point which I want to highlight here in case of microservices in a big team, if 10 people are working in accounting project, accounting microservice, they don't have to sit into inventory and payroll meetings and other meetings. Only when you want to do that connection, when you want to decide that context map, you can sit, right? So focus team, focus domain, focus service, individual deployment. Inventory is going on, accounting you are deploying, no problem. Why? Because database is separate and all. Individual scalability. You think that, okay, my front-facing website or whatever sales, has to be load balanced, but the accounting module is used internally. That does not have to be load balanced. Individual scalability, right? Maintenance, you can bring down one, work on another, right? Then data management, separate data management is there, separate databases is there, right? You can change one data structure, other does not get, right? So I think these are some of the benefits of microservices. Yeah. But remember, again think that you need microservices or not, right? Okay, very good question. Is Docker and container important for microservice? See, guys, microservice, as I've said, nothing is mandatory. Please understand. Microservice is an architectural style. Matlab architecture style, matlab sirf ek gyan, saying that divide your project into small logical pieces. That's it. वो ज्ञान देके चला गया microservice वाला. After that, we guys started thinking about, oh, let's talk about bounded context. Oh, let us talk about CQRS. Oh, let us put into separate Docker. Oh, let us make it. That is okay. The point is that, but these things are not compulsory to do microservice, right? See, remember, 100% time-tested solution is to follow DDD. That is everywhere in the industry, everybody is following. But if you think, no, like, I'm going to go and create a microservice, different databases, and I will use my own simple classical object-oriented programming, thumbs up. I will not use Docker, thumbs up, right? No problem. So there is no compulsion that you have to use Docker, you have to use containers, you have to use CQRS. There is no compulsion. But by following DDD, by following these ways of deployment, the modern ways of deployment, definitely you can scale up very easily, right? So, but no compulsion. Okay, guys. Okay, least impact, consider, let's have 20 legacy process. Okay, let's have 20-30 processes which need to run on daily basis. So let me ask, which needs to run daily? Can I consider to how to implement? See, all these, so if you have 20-30 legacy applications, do these legacy applications contribute to one application? For example, ERP. Now in ERP, you can have inventory, payroll, and all that, but they all go into one. But it cannot be like, okay, one is accounting and another one is doing something very different, right? They have to talk with each other. They have to communicate with each other, right? They have to go and make that single unit. So if they're doing it, must be, they are good candidate for microservice. But remember, I talked about large team, large project, good budget, individual scaling up. Keep that in mind as well. If you're thinking that is microservices there. Okay. Disadvantage of microservice. The first disadvantage is, I don't know to say, but it's a real factor, is that money and time, right? Complexity. Let me start first with complexity. As soon as complexity increases, paisa badh jata hai. Please note, with all this infrastructure complexity coming into picture, the failure of the project also increases. You have to have very good team members. One of the things which I want to put out there is, you cannot just put juniors out there. Please understand. They have to understand saga pattern. They have to understand resiliency. They have to understand design patterns. So now the level of developer rises, the salary rises. You have to invest in products like queues and so on. You have to invest in Docker licenses. Sab kuch double, triple ho jata hai. So these are, that's why I say huge budget, huge project, right? These are some of the disadvantages. Yeah. Oh, that's a reality actually. That project starts with microservices and then it becomes monolith, right? What comes in general domain? See, generic domain, it's not general domain. Let me correct that, Sandeep sir. It is generic domain. See, in generic domain, anything which is cross-cutting, for example, user management, user ID, roles, right? Logging, authentication, authorization, which is not common to not only your domain, but it can be used in other domains also. So mostly that's a generic domains are mostly technical domains out there. Okay. Okay. Good question. I'll take this question here. Okay. Guys, don't make microservices again chota kacha. Like this good question. I actually liked it. So authenticate. So should we say that should authentication itself be a separate microservice? Okay, yeah. There are two questions I have here. One is that, sir, can I make authentication and authorization a separate microservice? No. You can't make a data access layer as a separate microservice. That is, but yes, authentication and authorization and OpenID and OAuth, all that you can treat as a different microservice. For example, if you're using something like identity 4, I don't know if you do that. identity in our, which does open. This is a separate project. It's a separate component, separate deployment. Perfect. Single sign-on. Yes. Like Identity 4 project is a microservice. Yes. And I think authentication, authorization in microservices is very important, because one is that you have this different microservice, and single sign-on comes as a priority. So using something like some open source like OAuth, open sources like what is that? Identity 4, or there are two other, I don't remember, is very important. I think so. Yes, single sign-on is very important. Can I make data access there as an identity? No, you can't. नहीं, business logic नहीं, दो class microservice नहीं हो सकता है. आप थोड़ा ऊपर सोचो. मैंने जो पहला diagram, I made a first diagram, right? Think from the business level, guys. Don't start thinking at class levels. वो कल करेंगे हम लोग. We'll do that tomorrow. Okay. Okay, guys. Thank you very much. I know that today was a theory class, but I hope that this picture in mind, I want to just punch this picture. Microservice, domain-driven gives the path, core domain, generic domain, subdomain, different bounded context. Usi bounded context ke andar, they will have their aggregate root, they will have entities, they will have value objects, they will have repository, they will have CQRS, tactical design. Then two bounded contexts. If you want to map, there is a context map, different strategic design approaches, conformist and customer, supplier, and so on. When you talk with each other, have a common ubiquitous language. So these are some of the theory. I hope that it has been registered into your mind. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for attending this session. Tomorrow, guys, what we are taking. Tomorrow, we'll start with the tactical parts, the tactical part of it. Tomorrow, we'll create services. We'll create services, value objects, and entity. We'll talk about aggregate root. We will talk about repository. We will talk about CQRS. I don't know if we can do so much, but more tomorrow we'll talk about the classes part of it, right? Thank you very much. A very, very good night to everyone. And thank you, YouTube as well. All my YouTube subscribers. Love you all, guys, right? And tomorrow we meet again. Thank you.